think about the most confident person you know for a second. Not the loudest one. Not the one who posts the most wins online. I mean, the one who, when they walk into a room, you can just feel they're not rattled by much. They're present. They're engaged. But if everything went sideways, you get the sense they could shrug, adjust, and keep moving. That quiet, I'll be fine either way energy. Now, here's the uncomfortable question. When you picture yourself in your everyday life, at work, with your partner, with your friends, do you actually move through the world like that? Or are you always slightly on edge, checking if people are happy with you, explaining yourself, overthinking how that text sounded, replaying that one awkward sentence from 3 days ago at 2:00 a.m., wondering if people are slowly losing respect for you without saying it? If you recognize that you're not weird, you're normal, you're also bleeding power. Because underneath almost every form of real grounded confidence, there's one universal trait: nonchalance. Not fake I don't care bravado. Not coldness. Not being dead inside. The kind of nonchalance where you care, but you don't cling. Where you show up, but you don't chase. Where you can lose and it doesn't shatter your sense of who you are. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. He wrote about rulers who could face chaos, betrayal, war, and still appear unbothered, composed, in control of themselves. The prince couldn't afford to be ruled by his own emotions, or everyone else would rule him. It's the same game today, just with less armor and more email. So, let's talk about what this actually looks like for you in your real life as a normal human being with bills, responsibilities, and a brain that sometimes spirals at 300 a.m. Because if all this stays as theory, it's useless. I want you to finish this knowing how to be more nonchalant in a way that's actually practical. And later, I'll give you one simple sentence you can quietly run in your head in almost any situation to instantly dial down the anxiety and dial up the quiet confidence. Keep that in the back of your mind as we go and notice where it would apply for you. Let's start by clearing something up. When you hear be nonchalant, you might think, so I'm just supposed to not care about my job, my relationship, my health. That sounds like either denial or laziness. That's the first trap. Real nonchalance is not about caring less. It's about caring differently. Think of it this way. There are two kinds of caring. The first kind is anxious caring. You care because you're afraid. You're afraid of losing the person, afraid of being judged, afraid of being replaced. Everything feels like a test you could fail. Anxious caring sounds like, I hope they don't get mad. What if they think I'm stupid? What if they leave? What if this is my last chance? Now, there's a second kind, sovereign caring. You still care. You still want a good outcome, but you're not bargaining with yourself. Respect for it. Sovereign caring sounds like, I'd really like this to work. And if it doesn't, I'll still be okay. I want their respect. And I'm not going to twist myself into something fake to get it. I want this opportunity, but I do not need the specific one to be worthy. That second style, sovereign caring, is what nonchalance really is. You're not indifferent. You're grounded. Machiavelli would say it's the difference between being ruled by fortune versus using fortune. You can't control the storm, but you can absolutely control how you stand in the rain. So how do you actually build that? Let's pull this out of the clouds and into a couple of very real situations. Imagine you're at work. You made a mistake in a report. Your boss calls you out in a meeting. You feel that hot flush of embarrassment in your face. Your mind starts building a whole story. They think I'm incompetent. I'm on thin ice. Everyone's judging me. Anxious caring makes you either over-apologize. I'm so sorry. That was so stupid. It won't happen again. I can fix it right now. I'll stay late. I'll redo everything. Or you get defensive. Well, if I had more time, maybe I wouldn't have made the mistake. Both reactions are driven by fear. Now, picture a nonchalant response. Same mistake, same call out, but your internal dialogue sounds more like, okay, I messed that up. It's not ideal. It's also not fatal. Let's own it cleanly and move on. Outside, you say, you're right. That's on me. I'll correct the numbers and send an updated version this afternoon. And then you shut up. No rambling justification. No dramatic self-attack. No sulking. Just own correct move. You're not pretending it doesn't matter. You're just refusing to let it define you. That's nonchalance in action. Or look at dating. You text someone you like. They take forever to respond. Hours, then days. Your brain starts doing gymnastics. Did I say something wrong? Should I double text? Maybe I sounded too eager. Maybe I sounded too cold. Anxious caring makes you start overperforming. Sending another message. Checking a reading social media. Correctly posts. Editing yourself until you barely recognize your own voice. Nonchalance looks different. You notice they haven't replied. Your brain starts spinning the same story, and you cut it off. You remind yourself, I'm allowed to be interested, but I am not going to chase clarity from someone who can't even answer a basic text. You go live your life. You reply when they eventually do, if you still feel like it, and if not, you let it die. No dramatic speech, no temper tantrum, just quiet standards. Again, you still care. You just don't grovel. Machiavelli talked about this in political terms. The prince had to appear steady, predictable in his composure, even when the situation was uncertain. If he looked desperate for approval, his enemies sensed weakness. People stopped believing in leaders who can't hold their own center. We're not running a Renaissance state, but the human psychology is the same. People trust the person who doesn't seem like they're on the verge of emotional collapse every time something goes wrong. So, how do you become that person? Let's break it down into 3 parts. Your inner frame, your outer behavior, and your boundaries. First, inner frame. This is the story you tell yourself about what things mean. It is impossible to be nonchalant if everything means catastrophe. If a disagreement means they hate me. If a delay means I'm being abandoned. If criticism means I'm worthless. So step 1 is learn to downgrade the drama of your interpretations. Try this. The next time something triggers you. An email, a tone of voice, a look. Before you react, ask yourself one question. What else could this mean if it wasn't an attack on me? That one question creates a tiny crack between stimulus and response. Maybe your boss's blunt email doesn't mean they hate you. Maybe they're stressed. Maybe your partner's short text doesn't mean they're losing interest. Maybe they're tired. Maybe your friend not inviting you to something doesn't mean you're being replaced. Maybe they just forgot or assumed you were busy. I'm not saying those softer explanations are always true. Sometimes people are rude, careless, disrespectful. But if you automatically choose the worst possible story every time, you're giving away control of your emotional state. Machiavelli would say, you're acting like a subject, not a ruler. A ruler cannot afford to be emotionally jerked around by every rumor. You can't either. So here's a simple exercise to train this. For the next week, whenever you feel that surge, anger, shame, panic, give yourself a rule. You don't react for at least 5 seconds. 5 seconds of silence before you speak. 5 seconds before you type. 5 seconds before you hit send. In those 5 seconds, do 3 things in your head. 1, name what you feel. I feel embarrassed. I feel rejected. I feel disrespected. 2, ask what else could this mean besides the worst case scenario. 3, ask in 1 year. Will this still matter? That's it. You'll be amazed how often your initial impulse calms down enough to choose something smarter. Sometimes you still decide to confront. Sometimes you still decide to walk away. The difference is you're choosing from a place of groundedness, not pure reactive emotion. Second, your outer behavior. People can't see your thoughts. They see your timing, your tone, your body language, your words. A lot of people try to act confident by adding more. More volume, more jokes, more words. Nonchalance works the opposite way. You project strength by doing less. Less rushing to fill silence, less over-explaining, less fidgeting, less please understand I'm a good person energy. Think about Machiavelli's prince again. He didn't convince people by talking endlessly. He convinced them by being selective, reserved, measured. In normal life, that looks like this. Someone criticizes your idea in a meeting. Instead of immediately defending every detail, you pause. You actually consider what they said. You reply, okay, walk me through your concern in more detail. You let them talk. You don't interrupt. You keep your face neutral. Then you either adjust your idea or stand by it briefly. I see your point. Let's adjust X and keep Y, or I get the concern. Given our priorities, I still think this is the best direction. Short, clean, no emotional flailing. Or in an argument with your partner, they throw a sharp comment. You never listen anyway. Instead of snapping back with your own you always and you never, you breathe, you stay nonchalant. Not because they're right or wrong, but because you refuse to let the conversation sink into chaos. You say, okay, clearly you're frustrated. Tell me one situation where you felt I didn't listen. That doesn't mean you're a saint. You can still get angry. You can still set limits. But your first move isn't to throw gasoline on the fire. It's to keep your own match in your pocket. Here's a practical way to embody that more often. For the next 7 days, experiment with slowing down just a little bit in 3 places. The speed of your speech, the speed of your movements, the speed of your responses. When someone finishes talking, wait the slightest beat before you answer. When you're walking into a room, don't rush through the door. Take half a second more. When your phone buzzes with a message that makes your stomach drop, don't answer immediately. Even if you only wait 2 minutes instead of 10 seconds, that delay is you reclaiming your center. These tiny delays signal 2 things. To others and to your own nervous system, I'm not being dragged. I'm leading. Third, boundaries. This is where nonchalance goes from vibe to something solid. You cannot be truly nonchalant if you secretly feel like people are doing you a favor by being in your life. Machiavelli wrote that a ruler has to be willing to risk being disliked in the short term to preserve power in the long term. In personal terms, that means you must be willing to risk losing someone or disappointing someone to stay true to your standards. Otherwise, your nonchalance is fake. It's just a mask over desperation. So here's a tough but important question. Where in your life are you over-investing energy that isn't being matched? Is it at work where you're answering emails at midnight while your boss doesn't even remember your last weekend? Is it in a relationship where you're constantly soothing, explaining, fixing, and the other person is just consuming that effort? Is it in a friendship where you're always the one checking in, planning, making space, and they treat it like background noise? Nonchalance at its core is the willingness to say, I'm going to show up fully, but I'm not going to beg to be valued. Here's a brutally simple test. And yeah, it stings sometimes. If you stopped overgiving in that situation, if you stopped chasing, stopped over justifying, stopped rescuing what would actually remain. If the answer is not much, then your nonchalance isn't what would destroy it. Your nonchalance would just reveal what was already true. So try this small boundary exercise. Pick one area of your life, just one, where you feel you're always trying to prove yourself. For the next week, experiment with a new rule. I will do what is reasonable and self-respecting. I will not do what is resentful and self-erasing. If a request or behavior crosses that line, your response is not a dramatic speech. It's a nonchalant, simple no, or a quiet change in your own behavior. Someone keeps asking for favors but never shows up for you. Start saying, I can't this time. Boss expects you to answer everything instantly, even when it's not urgent. Start replying during work hours with got it. I'll handle this tomorrow. Partner or family member makes a snide comment. Instead of emotionally wrestling with it, say, I'm not okay with that tone. If you want to talk, let's do it differently. And if they continue, you walk away from the conversation. You don't have to win every battle. You just have to stop constantly surrendering your dignity. Now, remember I said there's one sentence you can run in your mind that shifts you into nonchalance almost anywhere. Here it is. I can want this without needing it to feel okay. Sounds simple, but if you actually live that, your entire energy changes. You can want the promotion. You can want your partner to understand you. You can want your friend to apologize. You can want your business to work, your content to do well, your kids to listen, your parents to finally see you as an adult. You just don't tie your basic self-worth to any single outcome. Whenever you catch yourself spiraling over a text, an email, a look, a result, pause and say quietly in your own head, I can want this without needing it to feel okay. That's the nonchalant mindset in a sentence. You become dangerous in the best way when people can feel that about you. Because think about the opposite. The person who needs every interaction to go their way in order to stay regulated. Every disagreement terrifies them. Every delay stresses them out. They cling. They argue. They chase closure from people who have no interest in giving it. Deep down, you don't respect that energy. Not in yourself, not in anyone else. We respect the person who can say, yes, I care, and no, I won't crumble. Let's make this even more concrete with a couple quick scenarios. You're 29. You've just started seeing someone. Things are going well. Then suddenly they're less responsive. The old you would go into detective mode, replaying every date, every word, asking friends, worrying you messed it up. The nonchalant Machiavellian version of you says, okay, their consistency dropped. That's information. My job isn't to drag them back to the original effort level. My job is to match their energy and keep my standards. So you pull back slightly. You stop initiating every time. If they move toward you again consistently, great. If not, you let the connection fade. No big breakup monologue. No desperate last text. You let their behavior tell you what they're willing to give. Or you're 42 in a corporate job. There's a reorganization. Titles are shifting. People start panicking. Rumors everywhere. Slack is buzzing. The anxious version of you joins the storm, constantly checking, gossiping, performing busyness for visibility. The nonchalant version of you says, okay, things are unstable. That's reality. I can't control the org chart. I can control how valuable I am, how calm I stay, and how quickly I adapt. So you quietly tighten up your work. You make sure the right people see what you do, not by bragging, but by communicating clearly and consistently. You start updating your resume without announcing it to the whole office. You network a little more. You're engaged, but you're not flailing. Or you're 36 dealing with family drama, sibling rivalry, parent expectations, whatever flavor your family specializes in. The old pattern is you getting sucked into every argument, explaining yourself for the hunt time, getting angry, then guilty, then exhausted, then at least nonchalance in that environment might mean you stop trying to win the emotional court case. You start choosing your battles. You let some comments slide that you'd normally latch onto. And for the ones that really matter, you state your boundary once clearly. I'm not going to keep having this same argument. You know where I stand. And then here's the Machiavellian part. You back it up with action. You leave the room. You cut that conversation short. You don't reopen it via text later. Gradually, people learn. You're emotionally available, but you're not emotionally owned. Now, I want to acknowledge something here because it's important. If you've been chronically anxious, chronically overgiving, or chronically reactive for years or decades, you might feel a bit called out right now, maybe even a bit frustrated. You might be thinking, yeah, it must be nice to be all calm and nonchalant, but my nervous system is not built like that. And that's fair. Some of us did grow up in environments where being hyper alert was necessary, where if you didn't anticipate everyone else's moods, things went badly. So now as an adult, it's hard to just not do that. If that's you, I'm not telling you just relax, bro. I'm telling you this is a skill, not a personality trait, and you can build it gradually. Start ridiculously small. Practice being nonchalant in low-risk situations first. Not with your boss, not with your partner, not with your parents. Practice with the barista who messes up your order. Practice with the driver who cuts you off. Practice with the stranger online who's wrong on the internet. Pick a few moments each day and ask yourself, is this actually worth my full emotional system firing up, or can I just let this one go? You don't need to win every battle. Sometimes the most Machiavellian move is to conserve your energy for what actually matters. And over time, as you see that the world doesn't end when you don't react, something shifts. Your nervous system starts to believe you. You realize I don't have to attend every drama I'm invited to. I don't have to defend myself in every conversation. I don't have to control how people see me to be okay. That's when nonchalance stops being an act and becomes your default. So let's bring all of this together. Truly confident people are not the ones who never feel insecure, never feel hurt, never feel doubt. They're the ones who can feel all of that and still keep their hand steady on the wheel. They care, but they don't cling. They want, but they don't beg. They're involved, but they're not consumed. Machiavelli wrote about princes who had to master their own fear before they could master anything outside themselves. You are your own little state. Your mind, your time, your body, your relationships. That's your territory. Nonchalance is how you govern it. So the next time life pokes at you, a slow reply, a cold tone, a criticism, a delay, a rejection, notice the familiar storm starting up inside. And instead of going into autopilot, try this. Pause for 5 seconds. Name what you feel. Ask what else it could mean. Ask if it will matter in a year. Quietly tell yourself, I can want this without needing it to feel okay. Then act from that place. Not perfectly, not all at once, not in every situation. Just a little more each day. Over weeks and months, people around you will start to feel a difference. They won't always be able to explain it. They'll just sense that you're not as easily pushed, not as easily baited, not as easily rattled. Some people will respect you more. Some will test you more at first. A few may fall away because they only knew how to relate to the anxious version of you. All of that is fine because your life is not meant to be a constant performance for other people's comfort. You're allowed to move through the world with a little more calm, a little more quiet power, a little more I'll be fine either way. That's not detachment from life. That's the freedom to actually live